So, my name is Calin Marian, and I will talk to you today about ways of approaching writing a module that makes it easier for you in long term to maintain it. One of the side effects will be that it will be easier to maintain different versions of your modules. So, my first advice to you is use Composer. For D7, there's a module called Composer Manager, if you don't know it, which allows you to basically use Composer to manage your module's dependencies. So basically, you can have dependencies on other modules, but also on other libraries that may or may not be Drupal specific. And this opens up a world of possibilities. The main one being using other people's code. We don't know everything. We have a big ego. And most of the times we have the inclination to rebuild stuff because we don't like something about another implementation. Things that are maybe not important, that we feel that we know better. But using other people's code, if it's written properly, if it's not a piece of shit code, but if it's written properly, even if it doesn't fit our view 100%, will save you a lot of time in the long run. So one of the best decisions you can make when you write a module is try to find if there are libraries that fix maybe not 100% of your needs, but like 85. And this will save a lot of time. And on the plus side, you can use it on any version because it's not Drupal dependent. But let's say you search for libraries and you find none, or you find one, but it's, I don't know, it's poorly written, it only covers like 10% of what you need, and you decide that you are gonna create a library instead. Putting the code in your module is not a good idea, for a reason that I'm not going to go into now. A better idea would be to create a library that covers what you want to do, but in a framework agnostic way. So create a library, put it on GitHub, allow Composer to grab it, so make it available in packages, and use it for all your versions of your modules. That's a better approach. Why? Well, on one hand, you don't have to maintain two versions of your code, a 7 version and an 8 version. On the other hand, you get maybe more exposure. Other libraries will do the same. Other users of other frameworks will do the same as you do and search for libraries, and they will find yours. And they will say, this looks interesting. It covers like most of what I want to do. I want to use it. And then they use it, and they say, oh, but this is a bug. Let's fix it. So now you have more people helping you maintain your code. If this is not possible, because, I don't know, the code you need to write is not so specific and maybe tightly coupled to Drupal, let's say, in a way, you can, okay, going back. You can create a library that is not a module, a library that is Drupal specific. And I have like a small example for you. We have PSR6, which standardizes in a way how cache interface, how cache storing works. It has an interface that you can use. And if your cache implementation is PSR6 compatible or standard, whatever, then it can be used by any other library. So you find a piece of code, a library that was written by some other framework, and it caches something, and it uses an object that implements the cache interface from the PSR6. Drupal 7 or 8 don't implement that interface. So what you could do is write a small library that is Drupal specific, that's an adapter, and makes calls to the Drupal cache, but implements the cache interface from PSR6. This is a 20 lines of code library, or 50 or whatever. It has a use case that is Drupal specific, but can be used by any module that needs it. So you create a library. This library is Drupal specific, but yet you can share it with anybody. So then again, you are open to other people helping you maintaining your code. If, for some reasons, that's also not possible, let's say you need a service or something that requires basically that you have a module, because libraries are not first-class citizens. They don't, they're not searched for discovery for plugins, for example. So you need a plugin. You basically are going to have to write a module. But that module doesn't have to be monolithic. So you have the option of splitting down the code that you need into specific use cases and build a module for a very specific abstract use case and publish that separately. And maybe other big modules will use that module as a dependency. An example from my recent work was we needed to overwrite an access handler for an entity. That entity, or entity handlers in Drupal 8 are like properties of the entity. And lately we like to use the decorator pattern because I'm not going to go into reasons why, but it's better than replacing implementations because it allows you to add things on things that are already added on the original implementation. But when things are hard-coded, like handlers for entities, you cannot use the decorator pattern. So we did a module that basically turns handlers into services. And then you can use the decorator pattern. And this module did a very specific thing. We had to be a module because services, so yeah, no library. But we did that module. And you can use that module for any module that needs to change something in the access of entities. Another recommendation I have for you is to use standards. If you use standards, like when you need for your library something like a cache or a logger, or something that most frameworks will have, use PHP Fig standards, PSR 6, PSR whatever, because this will make it so that other people can use your code, even if it's not for Drupal. And of course, as I said, this makes other people able to help you maintain your code. One other recommendation I have for you is if all my previous recommendations fail and you have reasons why you don't want to do this, write your code in classes, in Drupal 7, for example, and use an autoloader for that, and don't write procedural code. This has some advantages, like it's easier to maintain. It's more lightweight on Drupal, because Drupal will only load what it needs, so your code will not always be loaded. Like when you put it in a module, it's always in memory, even if it's needed or not. If you write OOP, put it in classes, you only load it when you need it. And writing classes will also force you to think about the architecture and make it easier for you to upgrade to 8, for example, or then to 9. Of course, this is no silver bullet. So basically, you have to be smart about it. Think about what your use cases are, if you can do this or not. Don't try to implement an approach only because you like it. It has to fit the needs of what you do. There's, as I said, no silver bullet. So yeah, that's basically my material. So I'm going to take questions if you have any. Or opinions, or disagreements. Okay. Go ahead.
What's your recommendation of maintaining a living project that is currently being developed?
Yes.
And a project and a module or library that you're using in that project?
Yes.
And at the same time, it's something you are contributing. So, like, you need two repositories to separate things, but at the same time, it's still in the same.
Okay, that's a tough question. So, in the beginning, we used to write like general modules, but keep them in the repository of the project they were written for. And then we said, oh, look, this project we could use for this module we could use for this other project. And we moved the code, but then we forked, basically. So that was a bad idea. So next what we did is we kept branches for projects. So we had the main branch that was released, and we had maybe some small things that we needed differently for other projects, and we kept branches for them. But the best idea is, I think, to just use versions. Use versions. So you stabilize the project, the module, at version, let's say 1.2. Keep using that for this project. In another project, you find new things you want to add. You release 1.3, 1.4. Then if you have time later, you can upgrade to 1.4 on the previous project. But you're not forced to do it when you implement the changes there. So like if you use Composer and you use packages and you use versions, this will solve this problem for you. But the main point is don't keep the code in the main project repository. Have a separate repository for your code. Use versions correctly. Use Composer in a way that pins down the version of the module. Don't upgrade until you're ready. Is this okay for you as an answer? Thank you for the question. Anybody else has questions?
To make it tougher, what if, how do you deal with the opposite situation that you have your project, you're running it,
yes,
and you use your own library, you pull it in by a composer, and then it's like that you want to amend it.
So lately what we've been doing, we have a composer workflow for the projects that we build, and based on this, integrated into this is Composer Patches, which is a library for Composer that allows you to automatically apply patches to your dependencies. So if the change we want to do is not general, is very specific to a project, and it's not possible to alter it via a hook, let's say, because it's a library, we just write a patch for it. We host it on our internal, not intranet, on a server, whatever. We create an article about it. We write why we did this way, because the why is very important. So it's like a wiki, and we create a new article under a section patches, and we say for this project, we needed this to happen. This is not general, so we decided to do a patch. And we upload the patch, and then put it in the Composer Patches, and it's applied automatically to all your instances. Thank you. Do you have another question? Well, we still have like 7 minutes, so if you do have another question, I can answer it.
Composer Manager, Composer file versus your main Composer file, aren't they aligned?
Okay, so there are two different cases. There's a case where you start a 7 project with Composer, then you don't need Composer Manager.
Unless you have a module which is using Composer Manager. Exactly.
But what I found myself in were situations where project was started like 3 years ago, 4 years ago. And switching them to a Composer workflow was difficult and time consuming. So we decided starting from now, when we build something for it, it will be with Composer. So Composer Manager handles this situation where it's not this, it's not that, it's somewhere in the middle. So all that we build from that point forward will be modules that have a Composer JSON file, have dependencies, can use Composer Manager to handle those dependencies. But other modules in the project are not managed by Composer. Thank you for your questions. They were really good questions. Okay, so if nobody else has questions, I think we're done here. Thank you for your attendance.